welcome to the show, and thank you so much for checking it out. I just want to remind everyone, if you haven't yet done so, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm very close to that 1,000 subscribers, and every one subscriber counts. So until I get that 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to be very annoying. So if you want to stop annoying me, then you could annoy other people so that we can just get to that 1,000 subscribers and be done with it. So if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you have already subscribed, then find someone else who can also subscribe. And anyways, my guest today is Touré. He is an author, music journalist, and TV personality, and he recently wrote a book about Prince called Nothing Compares to You. So we're going to talk a lot about Prince today and how talented he was and how accurate was the Chappelle Show depiction, why you might have him knocking on your door if you lived in Minneapolis back in the day. And plus, we're going to talk about some of Touré's other interviews, including Snoop Dogg, Courtney Love, the time he pissed off Suge Knight. That's a pretty good story. And he'll give me some interview tips at the end that I think are very valuable. So disclaimer on this interview, we did it via Zoom, which is usually fine, but the audio quality is not great on this one, especially towards the end. He cuts in and out a little bit. So I edited some of the stuff to try to make it better, but I can't do much when the audio cuts out. So just try to make it through if you can. And if you can't, I understand, but it's really too bad because there really is some great content in this episode. So there you go. How are you doing today?
Good, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Great. Wow, look at all those books behind you. You're talking about my wall, but I'm looking at yours. And I'm like, did you read all those books?
No, not all of them. Some of them are for the future or for reference. A few of them are my wife's, but I've 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 dug into a lot of them. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I have a bunch of books too, and like I've probably read about half of them. And like I don't know why I keep buying books when I haven't read the ones I have, but you know, it's like
I know.
it's a bad habit to get into. But
It's seduced by the idea of a new book. You know,
yeah,
I'm enjoying this book. Oh, but this book came out. Oh, I got to get that information in my brain right away. Okay, I'll stop this one. I'll read that
right.
one, and I'll get through that one. Oh, I should go back to my previous book. But I'm really excited about this other book that just came out, and then and on it goes and on it goes.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, so let's just dive into your book. So the book is called Nothing Compares to You, and it's about Prince.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Prince. I mean, I've always been. It sounds like you're probably a bigger fan than me, but I became a fan. I think probably when the Batman movie came out, and I was a kid, and I was like, oh, this music's like really good. And I remember getting the tape of that soundtrack, and I was like, oh, this is like really good music. And I think he influenced so many musicians. I was just at the Guns N' Roses concert last night, and the bass player Duff had the Prince symbol on his bass guitar. I was like, oh, that's pretty crazy. What is the odds of that? I'm interviewing you today, and
I mean, Prince seems kind of everywhere once you start looking for him, kind of see him all over the place. Um, I remember, I don't remember not knowing who he was. I remember hearing the song Dirty Mind and being young enough that I was like, oh my God, like that's crazy thing to say. Oh my God, he's got a dirty mind. Oh my God. And it seemed shocking. And like he wanted to shock. That was his whole thing at that point. And he got our attention. And in the years after that, he was becoming a real sort of celebrity within the Black community. And people who loved music, Black people who love music, were like, Prince is the man. And we're talking about through controversy in 1999. Prince is the man. His music's incredible. You know, you got to be into Prince. So definitely the older brothers and the young adults I was around were definitely talking about Prince as much as anybody. Um, and Purple Rain just changed the party. Controversy did a little bit, bringing a lot of white fans in, but Purple Rain made it a global phenomenon to where everybody was into Prince. And I mean, the band tells a story of going out on the Controversy tour and starting out doing, you know, places like Atlanta, New Orleans, what have you,
mhm.
and performing for, you know, like 80% Black audiences. And as the tour went on, the audiences started to get whiter and whiter to where they ended up doubling back and doing the first cities again, and now they're doing them for 60, 70, 80% white audiences, because now white rock radio is catching on and playing it, and more white fans are coming into the party. So it's been interesting to see him grow and change in terms of the fan base growing as time went on.
And wasn't that by design? Like he wanted to be mainstream and make it. I feel like I was going to ask you, do you think it was like more so than even artistic integrity? Like I think he wanted to be more mainstream, right? It wasn't more about like some artists would feel like it's more like, oh, this is like, you're messing with my artistic integrity. I don't want to sell out. But for Prince, I feel like he just wanted to make it and be successful and be as big as he could.
100%. At that point, there was a lot of segregation within the music business in terms of Black artists go in the urban department. They get a smaller budget than the pop budget. They are promoted to Soul Train and certain clubs and certain cities and certain. He wanted from the beginning to not be with the urban staff and the urban budget, not because he didn't want to be Black. He very much loved being Black, but he wanted, as you were alluding to, the pop budget and the pop staff, and to be a star for the whole world, and to be American Bandstand as well as Soul Train. He wanted both things, and that was part of everything. That was part of how he planned out the band. He was thinking about Sly and the Family Stone. He was thinking about Fleetwood Mac. They are white, especially Sly and the Family Stone. They're white and Black. They're male and female. I want some of that. Both those things. So Gail Chapman was playing keyboards in an early iteration of the Revolution. Lisa
Right,
Coleman
that was by
replaced.
design, right? He put white people in the band.
Absolutely.
So that, yeah.
Absolutely. So that it would be like, this is both of us. So everybody feel comfortable coming into this party. Lisa Coleman replaces Gail Chapman. Wendy Melvoin comes in replacing Des Dickerson. Because they talked about, there were definitely, Wendy and Lisa are extraordinary players who are lifelong musicians who come in with extraordinary chops. But the guys from the beginning, before they were in, talk about, we definitely leapt over certain musicians who may have been technically better because we wanted to make sure that we got some white folks in the group, just so that there was a variety of people in, on the stage, and everybody would see themselves represented. And, I know, for Prince's female fans, to see Wendy and Lisa up there rocking with him meant a tremendous amount to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing too. Like you talk about his band, but really, he didn't even need a band because he could do everything himself. Like, what is the line? Like they asked Eric Clapton, what's it feel like to be the best guitar player? And he said, I don't know. You'll have to ask Prince, because he could play guitar, drums, bass, and sing and write songs and write lyrics. And he excelled at all those things.
I have heard some dispute about whether or not our anti-vaxxer friend Eric Clapton actually said that, but that doesn't matter. The point you're making is absolutely right, that he played every instrument and played them at an extraordinary elite level. And like when you're in his band, like he might come over and play the drums better than you, and play the bass better than you, and play the keys better than you. And he would go in the studio all by himself from his first album and just make the whole thing all by himself, in the studio. He used an engineer, but like there were no producers. He relied more on the horn players. He wasn't really that good at the horns. And when I talked to some serious musicians about it, they were like, that you really have to change your lips, right? The embouchure, to get the right sound out of a saxophone or a trumpet or what have you. And so that's a whole different journey to mastery. But like anything else he could do.
Yeah, how did he? You talked about, I think in the book it said he played the guitar and the keyboard and sang at the same time. How did he even do that?
I do not do that, so I couldn't, but like
That's
he
crazy.
was one of these musical geniuses who could, do all these sorts of things at the same time. I
Right.
mean, look, this is a person who had uh, seizures as a very, very young person that really freaked out his parents. And he said to his mother one day, as a very young person, 5, 6 years old, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to stop having seizures. And he did, So, I mean, like, just an extraordinary amount of will, of ability to manifest his dreams, of being able to make anything come true. Because he was a person who was basically abandoned by his parents at around 13, had no money. Minneapolis, yeah, Bob Dylan, but like Minneapolis did not have, a history of creating, great musicians. Which is no slight, but it's not a New York, LA, Seattle, New Orleans, where people in the music industry was looking for people from. Why he succeeded it's kind of like wow, but like he willed it. I mean, like there was no plan B for this guy. He was dying to succeed.
Well, yeah, and he was so competitive. He had an interesting personality because he had different sides, but it's like he's competitive and serious, but angry, but also funny. And also you say that the competitiveness maybe hurt him later down the line because he was so competitive, like he couldn't collaborate. Like in the Michael Jackson, the USA for the world or whatever, we are the world. He wouldn't didn't do that because he couldn't be in charge of it.
Look, We Are the World was this massive thing. I mean, like we knew that it was coming, right? And like Quincy Jones, one of the biggest names in music, and Michael Jackson, one of the biggest recording artists in the world, maybe the biggest recording artist in the world at that time. We're like, okay, we're calling everybody. We're doing it on the night after the American Music Awards, so everybody's in town, and everybody who was a super brand name in music was going to be there. And Prince was in town. They asked him over and over, please come do this. This is going to be a huge deal. We're going to have a special section of the song for just you and Michael. And he would not do it because he was not a joiner. He wouldn't give up control. He didn't want to be on the same level as a bunch of other people. He's like, I have to be above. So he gave them a song. He gave them his own song. Here, you
Hmm.
can have this. So he's like, I'm contributing, but I'm not going to be part of that group.
Hmm. Yeah, is it maybe too because it was almost maybe like a defense mechanism because he was kind of bullied in high school. They said he was kind of like a nerd. Like, what did the comparison in your book? Because you said he was like Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite.
That's what people said, that he was like Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite. He was like a nerd, which is kind of amazing to imagine. But I mean, like what happened, what became of him was amazing to the people who went to high school with him to imagine, because they were like, where did this guy get this personality implant?
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, he he struggled with being a part of groups and like putting the revolution aside. Just the family structure had broken down early in his life, so just being part of any sort of group was hard for him.
Yeah, it seemed like he had a hard time communicating too, like with his band members, with Gail, the keyboard player. Like there was some outfit that he wanted her to wear, but he gave her like the wrong size, and he said, "You will wear this outfit, or you are out of the band, or something." And it was like I like the way she put it. She said the way he handled certain issues was hard. It was like a very simple thing, but he made it complicated.
Yeah, Gail saw him, and others did too, as fairly immature in terms of how he was able to interact with other people. Extraordinarily mature in terms of music, but
Mhm.
immature at how he related to people. And this is part of the core of what happens in his childhood, right? He leaves his mother's house because he doesn't like her and he hates his stepfather. And then he's with his father for about 6 months, and his father kicks him out for bringing girls over to the house. So after that, he feels abandoned by his parents, and the drive to become a rock star at all cost in order to show my parents that I was a worthwhile and valuable person. That rises up within him. So he spends his teenage years living in the home of a woman named Bernadette Anderson, who has 6 kids, most of them older than him. Extraordinarily maternal person. People were like, if you lived around this area, it wouldn't be shocking that he would end up at her house, because she was like a second mother to a lot of people. He grows up in her house, but like I said, she has 6 kids. He's living in her basement. She's divorced and pursuing an advanced degree in social work.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sound like she had a lot of time to be
Right.
mother henning over him and making sure he's eating his vegetables and all sorts. Now, she was extraordinarily encouraging, when he's 13, 14, 15, writing his first songs and playing them for her in the kitchen. And she's this great audience and just applauding him and encouraging him when he's just starting, when you really need encouragement, when your songs probably suck. But if somebody gives you encouragement, you keep going. She was that for him. That said, I imagine like I said, she probably didn't have that much time to be all on top of him the way, a normal mother, most mothers are on top of their kids. So he is able to spend his teens exactly the way he wants, which is constantly working on music all the time. Is he also doing the social development that normal teenagers do? No, it seems that he was not. It seems he was not learning how to do that basic, one-on-one or one-on-two, whatever interaction with people. So when he gets, later in his teens and his 20s, he struggles with how to interact with people. Now, give him a guitar in front of 100,000 people, he can rock that. One-on-one, much trickier. Just express your thoughts and your feelings with a single person, much harder. And if we weren't talking about music, forget about it.
Yeah, but it sounds like he used that pain, the rejection, and just put it all like he was that's what motivated him. And even later, when he was booed off the stage when they opened for the Rolling Stones, he used that pain and put it into the 1999 album, which it was a response to him being booed off the stage, right? And that's some of his most brilliant work.
Yeah, I mean, like the Rolling Stones situation is crazy. Mick and Keith had known who he was, wanted their crowd to get to know him a little bit better. This is when he's promoting Dirty Mind. So he was supposed to do several dates with the Rolling Stones. He did a Friday and a Sunday with the Rolling Stones. I believe it's 81. And it was a biker kind of crowd. It was the sort of people who would later be MAGA. It was very aggressive. They also had Jay Giles Band and George Thorogood and the Destroyers were on the bill. And Prince comes out, with his falsetto, wearing like women's clothes. At that point, a man wearing women's clothes was very triggering. We didn't have the sort of trans awareness that we have now. We didn't even have the gay awareness that we have now. At that point, like people were like completely freaked out. He does a couple of songs. The audience starts throwing stuff at him, food, bottles. It's going nuts. He leaves. He's so upset, so hurt. Flies back to Minneapolis. Mick calls him, Keith calls him, Des Dickerson calls him. You can't run away. You got to come back. We got to do another show. So he flies back and does the Sunday show. But now the audience is like ready for him. So they're throwing stuff again. He's super hurt and angry and upset. But yeah, so this is one of the seminal moments in the career, because he does have that drive and determination to keep going. Because that was Mark Brown, his bassist's first shows, the Rolling Stones shows. Yeah. And he's like, what did I get myself into? And he's like,
I feel so bad for that guy for some, like he got kicked in the chest and like all the stories. Yeah. I'm like, oh my God, like the nickname alone makes me cringe. And I'm just like, that guy seems like he just got shit on by Prince.
Well, but Prince is like, when we get to Detroit, it's going to be different because he knew his audience. That's not my
Yeah.
audience. When he's
Okay.
headlining in Detroit, now we're rocking. Now this is amazing. Now this is a show. But yeah, out of that experience, Morris Day and others said, um, he said, I gotta stop with the, with some of these women's clothes and wear a little bit more clothes because this is not working.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then you talk about his family background, and I think he kind of made amends with his father a little bit more, but not so much his mother. But then the mom did come back in the picture, and he kind of struggled with, he did buy her house, but he kind of struggled with that decision. It kind of reminded me, I don't know if you're familiar with Quentin Tarantino, but I guess it was like it's kind of a similar story where the mom kind of didn't support his dreams, and so he decided, I'm never gonna give you any money, and he never did. He never gave the mom, but Prince did buy his mom a house, which it still
I'm a
sounds like,
huge I'm a huge Tarantino fan, but I did not know that angle of the
ah,
story. That's really interesting.
yeah,
Um,
like he decided he's never gonna. I guess the only thing he did for his mom was he helped her out of the a jam with the IRS, but he never like bought her house or cars or any of that stuff. So, and it's interesting that Prince did buy his mom, but it sounded like he did. He kind of struggled with that. It sounded like the mom came back and it was very fake that she was all of a sudden interested in her son, where she had kind of abandoned him, like you said.
yeah, I mean, he really did not like his mother when he left her house, and he never forgives her. He really disliked his stepfather, and even in his 20s, she rarely comes around. Everybody knows to not really mention her. It's a very sore subject. All the girlfriends talk about seeing him do an impression of her that's pretty mean spirited,
Hmm.
of her, smoking and drinking. And the thing is too that he invites her to the premiere of Purple Rain. He invites her to his first wedding. So he wants her to see these big moments, but at the
Hmm.
same time, he really didn't like her, and he really did not welcome her back into his life. Um, he he does embrace his father, John Nelson, in his 20s. They are hanging out. John's a co-writer on a bunch of songs on some of his bigger albums. But but not the mom. The mom is not allowed to be part of the big success. So she comes around occasionally, but not very often.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and then obviously there's a lot of romantic relationships, which I want people to read the book. So we'll skip that portion of it. But there is a theory, and you talk about in chapter 10 that Prince was maybe bipolar. Because how else did he stay awake for 2 to 3 days straight? And he was drug free. He didn't drink, he didn't do cocaine or anything. The weird thing was too, I think I read, I don't know if it was in the book or somewhere else, where he'd eat these, like, he'd go on these cake binges, and he thought the cake helped him stay up. Because to me, that would put me to sleep.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm trying to help my wife with something real quick before she runs out. He, yes, I don't in the 80s especially. I mean, like as far as I can tell, we're talking about a lifelong insomniac.
Hmm.
Um, you know, as far as I can tell, this is a lifelong insomniac. I have stories of people saying, in his teens, he's knocking on my door at 3 a.m. saying, I want to record a song. In his 20s, he's, up for 24 hours, 48 hours, what have you, making music straight, somebody in the NPG referred to him as a daywalker vampire. So it's just like,
Hmm.
when does he sleep? It's not really clear. I mean, Jerome from the time, who knew him in Minneapolis, was with him like deep into his career, is like, I've never seen him sleep. Like when I go to bed, he's awake. When I wake up, he's already up and doing,
Hmm.
like, I don't know when I've been on tour with him, I've been at home with him. I don't know when he sleeps. Um, I don't know that it was a particular disorder, but it must have affected him. I mean, insomnia has effects on people. So I mean, that's part of what we're dealing with, and I think that's partly playing into like that he had folks felt he had like multiple personalities. Like you were never really
Yeah.
clear who was going to walk in the door at any given time. It might, the revolution had names for four personality types that they saw consistently. There was Steve, who was nice and sweet. There was Shaft, who was very alpha and aggressive and would go on stage and rock. There was Marilyn Monroe, who was very sweet and coquettish and feminine, but treacherous, they said. And there was Fred Sanford, who's kind of like ornery and an asshole. And and these are the sorts of people who, sort of might walk in the door on any given day, and they kind of tried to like vibe out real quick, like who has arrived today? Is he the nice guy? Is he the ornery guy? Like, what are we about to get into here? And given who walked in the door, that sort of told you like what you're about to get into.
Yeah, and then it's interesting. So like he didn't do the drugs or the alcohol at the beginning of his career, but then eventually he started doing the opiates, and that was because probably he was dancing around in high heels, right? And that caused him pain, and so he had to do something about that, right? Is that what kind of started it? He wasn't taking the drugs for recreational purposes. It was like actual like pain pills.
So yeah, he takes opioids for many years to deal with pain. The hip was a big problem. I think it was also in the back and the lower back and the knee, but it was mainly in the hip. And he debated having hip surgery for many years. I don't know that it was high heels specifically. I think that we're really talking about years and years of thousands of shows, of never taking a break, of at one point I counted it was like 10 tours in 10 years. You're talking global tours, you're talking, long tours. I think it was the length of time in which he was touring all the time. I think that's the core problem here that led to this physical issue, that he
Right.
was dealing with a hip, that he was dealing with. I think that's the core of it.
Do you
I
think
don't.
though was see because I thought, and this was even before I read your book, I remember hearing that he was addicted to the pain pills because he wouldn't have the hip surgery because he was a Jehovah's Witness. Is there truth to that? Is that against his religion to get surgery?
Yes, as far as I know, the witnesses, as far as he understood, the witnesses did not want you to cut the body in that way. Did not want you to have surgery. Um, and him later in life becoming a witness uh, complicates the decision of whether or not to have surgery. It makes that decision very fraught because the faith is saying, no, don't do that. And he's saying, but I want to do that because I'm in a lot of pain. Now, look, the faith was surely not saying it was okay to take opioids, right?
Right?
I mean,
Yeah.
surely we're not saying it's okay to be a drug addict.
Yeah.
Um, but, these are the choices that he made.
This is fascinating too. I just finished the book today, and I read this part where, when he was the Jehovah's Witness, that he would knock on people's doors and try to preach them on religion. And it wasn't uncommon for him to knock on your door during a Minnesota Vikings game. I mean,
It
how
would.
weird would that be to open your door and Prince is there, and you're just like, well, I mean, that would be shocking.
It would be shocking. I mean, like, I think we got to remember how small Minneapolis is, right? And he's the biggest game in town, and he'd been living there for a long time. So it wasn't totally surprising to see him around. Now, he may not have knocked on your door ever before, but he took being a witness very seriously. He
Yeah.
proselytized, he did the thing. But I mean, like, I have a small sense of that. Like, I live in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. This is where Spike Lee grew up mostly. His first several films were set here. His office is here.
Hmm.
We see him all the time. my kids are like, oh, there's Spike. Like,
And you got to
you
interview
know,
him right on your podcast.
I did. I've known him for a while,
Yeah.
but I mean, partly because we lived on the same block when his kids were little, I mean, like, I know his wife. I mean, like, he was a neighbor of mine, so I mean, like, we see him around, he's shooting a commercial. We just saw him the other day, he was shooting a Bitcoin commercial, and then he was hanging out in the park, just sitting there, and like, and he's riding by on his bicycle. So I mean, like, he was in the world. So, if he is in the world of this neighborhood. So if he ever, like, say, knocked on my door and said, hey, can you give me a donation? I'm trying to finish this film about, Marcus Garvey or whatever. It wouldn't be like, oh my God, it's Spike Lee. Like if he knocked on your door, so, I imagine folks in Minneapolis had been seeing him rising. Most of them had seen him either at First Avenue or driving down the street, or they knew where Paisley Park was. I mean, he's by far the mega celebrity in the area. But yeah, he took being a witness super seriously, was knocking on doors. Actually, interesting within that too, he becomes a witness later in life. He was a Seventh-day Adventist as a child. His mother and his grandmother were taking him to church. His father was also a Seventh-day Adventist, and they took him to church. And there, he's learning the story of the Bible and the world. And the Adventists, like the witnesses, are an end time faith. They believe the world is about to end. Right. The whole thing with the Seventh Day Adventists, there was a woman who was their leader in the 1800s, I believe in the 1850s, who said the world will end on this day. And when it didn't happen, she said, well, we have to be ready because it's going to happen at any moment. So so you're supposed to be constantly ready for the world to end. So the notion of apocalypse is constantly being discussed because the apocalypse is always around the corner in the Seventh-day Adventist mythology, right, and philosophy of the world. So this is the real reason why he's doing songs like 1999 and other songs about the apocalypse, like Let's Go Crazy, because that's what, right? And I think at the time we thought like this is a response to the Cold War, but it's really a response to his religious upbringing. It fits with the 80s because we're all thinking of the Cold War, but he's really thinking about being a Seventh-day Adventist.
That's interesting. Yeah, so towards the end there, when he was getting addicted to the pain pills, and it was interesting because Mark had an interesting comment about that. How he said he got to the point where the addiction settles in, but he kept it hidden because he didn't want anyone to see him struggling. He was too proud to ask for help. Because I think if he would have asked for help, he would have been able to get help from that issue. I mean, there's so many people that have stories that have gotten off drugs like that.
It's hard to help an addict who doesn't want to be helped.
Right.
And like the addiction becomes almost like a voice or a being, an entity inside you that fights for survival and will do anything it can and use any argument and use any feeling and push any button to keep itself alive, just as you would try to keep yourself alive against anything that happened. If three guys ran in with a knife, you would fight to the death because that's what humans do. We try to save the body. And the addiction becomes like a person inside of you that fights to save itself. So, and I say this as an addict who no longer uses, and I know how hard it was for me to get past, my stuff and what I was doing, and the roller coaster of copping and using and feeling good and then coming down and want to use again, and the voice is constantly saying, it's raining, let's get high. It's sunny, let's get high. It's snowing, good reason to get high. Like, so everything, it's morning, good reason to get high. It's night, good reason to get high. Like, so everything constitutes a good reason to get high to you. Like, I got a lot of work to do, let's get high. I have very little work to do today, let's get, like, do everything to you is let's get high. Like, you're kidding me. And if the addict is not truly ready to face that down and really doesn't want to be an addict anymore, I mean, like, I think about all the times that I fought to get off of drugs and wasn't able to. And when I really wanted to, it was easier. That last time, it was easier. Not easy, but easier because the values and the ideas around why I wanted to quit were more clear and tangible and desirable than I had ever had.
Yeah, because you would think that he was getting close to that point if he hadn't have passed away. Because I love this thing where you talk about the end, where the loneliness of him. Like he'd had two failed marriages, and like he just didn't really have a lot of good friends. And I think there was where he was at this party, and like Seinfeld was there, and Zuckerberg and Chris Rock, and he seemed really lonely. And I love this quote that you had. You said, it was finally like being a rock star was not enough to sustain him anymore. Like that was because he had worked so hard and he got it. And then it kind of reminds me of that Jim Carrey quote that it's like where he says, "I wish everybody could be rich and famous and get that, so then they could see that that's not the answer." And that seems like it kind of was for Prince too. It's like he got what he wanted. He was huge. He was a famous rock star, and it's like then he was still like struggling like with just being happy.
I mean, I think for most of his life, being a rock star fulfilled his dreams, and it was what he wanted, and it gave him, access to indulge his creative impulses, as a musician, to take care of people, causes, what have you, that he wanted to have the life with women, to never have to say I'm sorry, all these sorts of things. Um, you know, but yeah, as he got older and others were familying up, and his contemporaries were diving deep into family, he struggled to be able to become a family man. And partly that was because of the difficulty with relating to people. Music was always going to be number one. Even if you were his wife, music was his true wife, and you were going to be second. One of the guys talked about, like, if you are saying, hey, come home from the studio and let's have dinner together, it's not going to happen, or let's have a conversation about our relationship. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, he might make a song about you and the relationship so you understand where he's feeling, but like having a conventional date or having a conventional conversation, for the most part, these things were beyond him. Um, he tried very hard with his marriage to Maite. You know, they lost their first baby, which was uh, presumably, understandably traumatic. Some people lose a baby and their relationship continues and finds new footing and keeps going. Sometimes that is enough to end the relationship. And I think people said, like that was the effective end of the relationship. Like they never really got back on good footing after that, because it was just very hard. There was a
Yeah.
miscarriage after that, so they tried again. It didn't work out, and it was really tragic because when I visited Paisley Park, they were they had just gone through that experience. They weren't talking about it, but you could see that Paisley had been changed to make it like brighter and more colorful. You could see a child's jungle gym in the back. It had been this like this white cube, and then he's about to have a baby, and they made it like bright and colorful and like doves painted on the wall. And one of the profound disappointments of his life, understandably.
Yeah.
And I think that, as folks talked about, the profound disappointment of losing a child led him to sort of question God, led him to question his place in the universe and spirituality. and that led him into becoming a Jehovah's Witness.
Hmm. Okay. So yeah,
So it's a huge shaper of the entire last period of his life.
for sure. Well, one thing that you, because for some people that's just maybe a casual Prince fan or who don't know him. For a lot of people, like the only thing they know about Prince is the Chappelle Show. And so I had to like figure out, was he mad about that? But I read that he actually first Chappelle asked him to do it, and he said no. But then after he saw it, he actually did think it was funny, and I think didn't he even he put the single "Breakfast Can Wait" had cover art featuring Chappelle's depiction of him, so he did think it was funny. Now tell me too, like, do you think it was accurate? Because you played basketball with him. It sounds like it was kind of similar.
Totally accurate. When I saw when I saw that sketch on Chappelle's show, I was like, they stole my story because I had an extraordinarily similar
Yeah,
story with him.
you do.
There wasn't pancakes involved, but
Okay.
like Chappelled it up,
Yeah.
game blouses. But I mean, like he loved playing basketball, from his teens to his 30s and 40s. There was a basketball hoop right in Paisley Park, and he was all about playing basketball, and he was a good basketball player. As soon as we started playing, he had on these red and white Nike high top Air Force One high tops, and
But did
as soon as we started,
did he wear like the frilly kind of stuff, or he didn't wear like shorts and a t-shirt?
no, he had on. We did a photo shoot, and then he went right into a rehearsal right from the photo shoot. So he had on Prince gear, a black scoop neck top, right,
Okay.
and like black bell bottom pants and black boots. And when he said that he would play basketball with me, he said, like, bring out the box of sneakers. He said that to an assistant, and they brought out a box of sneakers, and he took off the boots and put on the Air Force Ones.
Okay.
And so, the mask came off, which was the whole point of trying to play basketball with him for me.
Yeah.
Because you
Okay.
felt this sense of like, I'm giving you a certain self. I'm keeping it weird. I'm keeping it distant. Once you started dribbling that basketball, I felt like I was in competition with another boy. There's trash talking, there's competitiveness, there's the struggle to show like who's superior. We're going we're just going at each other, trying to
Mhm.
fake each other. And like he's good. He looks like a ball player. He's dribbling, behind the back, through the legs, he looks totally comfortable and at ease and at home on the basketball court. Clearly, not like an awkward game, but a very smooth, athletic, silky game. The way he shot, I would compare to like the form of like a Steph Curry, like great
Wow.
form, very smooth. I'm not saying the guy's going to go out and knock down 30 from the half court line, but like that's the form. That's how
Hmm.
he looked. That
Wow.
smooth, that athletic, traditional, basketball form. So he's knocking down jumpers, and he was just fun to play with, and he was talking smack and making layups and making jumpers. And so I mean, he had constructed this world where we thought, which was mostly correctly, that all he ever did was play music, which for the most part was true. But to find out that he was into basketball was a shock to a lot of people, because he only let you see,
Yeah.
some other people like let you into their world, and like, I do other things, like music is not the entirety of my life. And he was like, no, music is the entirety of my life. This is all I care about.
And also, didn't he play? He was like a Forrest Gump ping pong. Like he was that good at ping pong. He was like Forrest Gump. And then he also, I think he played pool too. So he was competitive at these certain things.
Yep. He loved to compete. He was great. I'm told he was great at pool, like a pool shark. He was great at table tennis, like could have maybe been a professional. Like nobody was beating him at any of these things. Like he's very good.
Yeah. Well, okay, so yeah, people need to get the book. We just touched the surface on that, but I did want to talk. If you have time, we talk about you a little bit because you've done a lot of cool stuff as well. You've done so many things. You worked at Rolling Stone, and then is this true? You hosted a reality show called "I'll Try Anything Once," where you tell me about this because it sounds intriguing. Where you did a variety of different jobs like rodeo clown and lumberjack.
Yeah, that was a fairly extraordinary situation there. There's a little show for a network called Treasure HD, and we would drive generally to the middle of nowhere, sort of places, places that are not normal like tourist destinations. And I would have a couple of days, like 3 days, to like learn some skill from a master at it, and then practice it. And they wanted to see me fail, and then you would have some event where you were supposed to like perform, and like it wasn't supposed to be like you would crush it. It was supposed to be like you and like my sort of ego would get all in it because I'm like, I want to like do good at it. But like we did lumberjack sports in Wisconsin, which was mainly log rolling. You know what log rolling is? Like when you see like a log in the water and people are sort of like walking on the
Yeah.
log and trying to make the other person fall.
Oh,
Did
okay.
that,
Yeah.
or that, or like running across the log. So you try to run across, like the
Huh.
log is in the pool and you try to run across it, which is really hard. I fell in this freaking pool like a million times. It got like freezing cold. Um, I did a demolition derby in Indiana, which was amazing, with this amazing guy. I mean, like that was scary as hell. We are driving around, crashing into people and getting crashed into, and like for the one thing I realized that you start with like 10 cars in a relatively small space. So you're not gonna hit that hard at the beginning because there's not that much space to like, you know, to take off and hit somebody. Like you gotta like have like a little distance away from somebody to really get it. But like, after, like half of the group gets eliminated, you can get some space and you can really hit somebody pretty hard, and the audience wants to see you hit people hard. You can't disengage. If you're not hitting somebody every so often, they count you out. So you got to be like attacking each other. And it was kind of traumatic. We did movie stuntman school where we had to do
Man.
really high falls. Um, I did a solo jump from a plane, which was
Wow.
kind of crazy. So it was like every week it was like, okay, so we're gonna freak you out with some insane task and see if you can learn how to do it, really fast. It was
Wow.
fun though.
That does sound fun. So yeah, I mean, and you've
Really,
interviewed.
the crazy the crazy thing, the crazy thing is that in the last one we did, I was doing I was a private sanitation removal industry. I was in the private sanitation removal industry. Um, one second. Uh,
Sanitation removal?
yeah, yeah. So like, you have trash you want removed. You may
Hmm.
call, like Got Junk or something like that.
Oh,
Or I
okay.
was working with a group called the Junk Pros. Okay, so all that week I had been just sort of seeing different things that are part of being part of like a junk removal person. And I didn't remember. Oh. So, but we knew all along that my first baby was about to come. So it was like any day now, like this could happen. We assumed like it might come at night, and like I'd call them the next day and be like, so I can't do the shoot tomorrow because we just had the baby. Well, we'll push it
Yeah.
back a day or whatever it is. So the final day, I was supervising this team that was cleaning up this gigantic, horrific area behind this apartment complex in the Bronx. And because I was supposed to be the supervisor and doing this work, and I wasn't really picking up the garbage, they were. And I was really like stopping to do interviews to talk about what we were doing, and didn't want to seem like a dick to the guys. Like, I'm not really working, I'm on my phone. They wouldn't understand, like, I'm about to have a baby, maybe, like, who knows. So not really using my phone. Plus, I have these gigantic gloves on, right? And I'm picking up trash when I can. So I'm not on my phone. Um, and we're finding just the most disgusting stuff you could imagine, right, behind this apartment building.
Oh
So
God.
finally, we break for lunch at 12 o'clock, and I grab my phone, and there's like 50 texts,
Oh
and
shit.
I'm like, oh shit, what is this? And the first like 20 are from my wife, like, I feel like shit. Oh my God, it's happening. I'm going into labor. Like, short text, like, where the hell are you? Like, I'm losing it here, and then like her friend takes over, because like she called her friend, like, come pick me up, take me to the hospital. Like, this is, now this is Andrea, and like I'm driving her to the hospital, and we're getting to the hospital now. She's doing like blow, and I'm like, holy shit, you guys, like, we gotta go to the hospital now. Like, they've been texting me for an hour, like, where are you? And she's at the hospital telling the baby, wait for daddy. And the people are like, where's your husband? And she's like, I don't know. And they're
Oh
like,
shit.
that is like this ridiculous. Like, you don't know where he is? Like, oh my God. So we race to the hospital. It's like straight out of a movie. I get to NYU and I run in, and I'm wearing coveralls that say the Junk Pros, and under that a T-shirt that says the Junk Pros, and a jacket that says the Junk Pros,
Uh,
right? And like, you couldn't tell him, like, he's not from like, he's just doing a TV show. Like, they're like, you didn't know where he was. He's got all this junk removal stuff. He looks like a winner, lady. Like, good job.
oh.
And I'm smelly, like fresh from picking up garbage. But the baby waited. I stripped down all that stuff, and got some basic T-shirt and stuff in the hospital, like, root, like, store or whatever. And the baby came after I had cleaned up a little bit.
Oh,
But that was kind of crazy.
that's crazy. Yeah. So I mean, you've done some amazing interviews, like famous ones like the R. Kelly and the Suge Knight story is crazy. Neil deGrasse Tyson, you got to interview him. That's really cool. Do you have any advice for people who want to be maybe specifically like a music journalist? Like, how do you stand out as an interviewer or a music journalist when because it just seems like there's so many avenues for interviews now, with like everyone's got a podcast like me. So how do people stand out? Like, is asking tough questions a big part of standing out for being a journalist or interviewer?
I don't think it's about asking tough questions. It's about listening at a level where they can start to tell you things that you did not know to ask.
Hmm.
And if you're listening at a really, really intense level, you can start to hear between the lines. Some of it is paying attention, listening. I think about times when people have sort of like mentioned their mom a couple of times, and I'm like, is he kind of saying he wants to talk about his mom, and like flowing into that area, and then they give me some incredible story. um
Hmm.
or just sort of using the common sense of like, huh, if I did that when I was 17, my mom would have freaked the fuck out. I'll tell you one story like that. I'll tell you two stories like that. Interviewed Snoop for the cover of Rolling Stone several years ago.
Hmm.
And we went to his son's youth football league, which was actually his youth football league that he had created for all the local boys to have a youth football league. And he was super, I mean, is super into football at an extraordinarily deep level. Um, we go to his house, and we go out in the back where he's got this little man cave with like a little couch that's big enough to sit two people. And this is his special place, right? His special man cave. And we're watching footage of the 10-year-old team that they're going to play next week. Okay. And, look at number 17 and how he runs to the right. We got to make him run to the left because he did it. So, one picture on the wall that's framed, it's Snoop at a party wearing a big mink, and Puffy wearing a big mink, and then a shorter guy in between them wearing a big mink. Was, who's the other guy? Because I know Diddy, and who's the other guy? And, this is a picture and clearly in a place of prominence. My wife's father, he was the biggest pimp in Long Beach in the 70s. And just mentioning that led to this conversation about Snoop sort of leaving the rap game and semi-leaving his family kind of for a minute to pursue his lifelong dream of being a pimp. And he tells this whole thing about like going off and being a pimp. And sort of we come to the end of the story and I'm like, he's like, I never hit the girls, just using my tongue, and I wanted to see if I could do it. And I was really good at it. And I was like, why didn't your wife leave you? And he's like, I already told you her dad was a pimp. She came from the life, so she kind of understood it at a different level than an average person might. So she was accepting when he came back and was like, okay, I'm fully dedicated to you and this family again now, and I'm not going to be taking that excursion anymore. One more thing like that, smaller, but again, just paying attention. I was doing a cover story for Rolling Stone on Beyonce, and I noticed that her assistant had Beyonce tattooed on her wrist. And I knew that it was a dumb question to ask because it would get me in trouble. But I had to take a step further in terms of curiosity and asking the girl, you have her name tattooed on your wrist? And she's like, no, this is my name. My name is Angela Beyonce. Beyonce is a family name. The Angela was her cousin. And so I asked Beyonce about it, and she kind of knows some of the story. But Tina was more than happy to talk about it because that's her maiden name, right? She was born Tina Beyonce with an I instead of an O, but she was Tina Beyonce before she was Tina Knowles. And, when she got pregnant, she was like, we're going to name the baby Beyonce. And her dad was like, that's not a first name. And she's like, Daddy, nobody outside of, Louisiana knows that. And, they might have been in Houston by that point, but the family is from Louisiana. So, it was just sort of being open and listening. I don't think folks want to hear their heroes or whatever squirm, right? But if you can get to a deeper level of understanding of them, that they're telling you like, I was a pimp, just 5 years ago. This is my family name, whatever the case may be. I think that gets to a really interesting place for folks.
That's really good advice. I like that. Yeah, that is a big portion of doing the interviews is listening and finding these clues almost. Right? That's got to be a big piece of it.
Yeah.
But sometimes stuff though, and you bring it up like with the Suge Knight. Like, did you know that you were going to piss him off when you asked him about the lawsuit though? Or were you that just your natural curiosity?
Well, let's see. I interviewed Suge Knight because I was doing a story on Dick Griffey, who was one of the great record executives of the 70s. And I was doing a story for the New Yorker, and I kept asking Dick, let's go see Suge, because Dick said Suge was one of his mentees, right? And he kind of said like, yeah, me and Suge, sort of started Death Row, but he cut me out of it, and I'm suing him because, I should be getting a piece of Death Row. Like, what the hell? And Dick was this great, gigantic, tough guy, brilliant, very much Suge before Suge. Not quite the gangster that Suge was, but in many ways, tough and smart and shrewd before Suge. And so Dick finally called Suge and said, I want to come over and, as reporter. And, I mean, and then he left, he drove me there, but then he left. And then he didn't leave death row. He just left the room. And I interviewed Suge and I'm asking him different questions about Dick Griffey. And, and then I was like, so what's up with the lawsuit? That's all it was. It wasn't one of these probing questions.
Yeah.
I mean, it was probing, but it wasn't like, this sort of in-depth, sharp, nailed down question. It was like, so Dick's suing you. What's up with the lawsuit? Which I think is kind of naive. Like, I think I was in my 20s. I should have had a better question. And I definitely did not think that he was going to get super upset and freak out and want to freaking kill me.
Yeah, because that's not somebody I'd want to piss off. I mean, yikes! That's because when I heard that story, I thought, man, he's fucking ballsy. But maybe you were just. So it sounds like you were just more naive, is what you're saying.
Definitely naive, but I definitely was like, you can't be afraid of these people. I mean, like, there's definitely ballsiness in that. It's like, you definitely can't be afraid. You can't tell me that you were afraid to ask him a question. Like, I definitely would get like the little devil on my shoulder and be like, you can't tell me you were afraid. Like, you didn't ask him that because you were afraid. Like, what's he gonna do? Freaking kill you? Like, beat you up over a question? Like, and I don't say that just for Suge. Like, anybody I would have interviewed in that era of my career, I was definitely like, what are you afraid? And like, if that voice came out, I was like, well, I have to ask you. I can't kowtow to fear. So yeah, it was definitely like, what's up with the lawsuit? He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, you know what I'm talking about.
He almost tried
And
to
it
give you
went
like an out.
downhill
You
from
could have like, it
there.
almost like that was like his hint to say like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like that was like, okay, never mind. But you're like, no, you know what I'm talking about. You kind of kept probing.
I couldn't. Once I decided to go in, I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let it go with like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and next thing you know, he's he's
Hey, at least he didn't
he's
dangle you from the balcony like he did with Vanilla Ice. Is that it? Do you think that's a true story?
the true story. I don't have any inside information on it, but I do think it's a true story. He basically, this is traumatizing to even remember this, but there was only one door out of his office at death row, so I was sort of like stuck in his office because I was like, I'm trying to leave and he's like, you're not going anywhere, sit the fuck down. And he's gigantic and it's his office and I'm like, ugh. And nothing has happened yet, so let me not push it. And he had this guy, clearly blood, fresh off the street. I mean, like fresh off the street, maybe fresh out of prison. I have no freaking idea. But like way harder than anybody who I ever interacted with. And the guy was just standing there like, tell me what to do, And if he had said, beat that guy up, like it would have been a problem. Um, and at one point in my mind, I was like, okay, so the over under now is one broken bone. Like if I only have one broken bone out of this, then I'm good. Like I'm good. Like, two is bad, like, but one, like we're changing the threat matrix to orange to where like, if only this level of bad happens, then we're ahead of the game. And the guy kind of, like barked at me for a minute, and Suge was kind of threatening me and using him to threaten me. And it was very stressful and very scary. And then finally that guy left. And we actually continued the interview. He asked me to rewind my tape to the beginning and press to record over our prior conversation. But then, in an extraordinary show of recall, he repeated his part of our 45-minute conversation.
That's crazy.
You know, like remembering like what he said in order. You know, he wasn't repeating my questions, but he knew, like, you know, and he didn't say that, but he knew, like, then you asked about this, then you asked about this, then you asked about this, and like, and then when we got to the part about the lawsuits, he was like, okay, shut off your tape recorder and get the fuck out. I was like,
Wow.
but it was an extremely, definitely the most frightening, I think, probably the most frightening moment of my adult life. I really didn't know if I was going to get, you know, my ass really beat. Crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's cool that he let you go and you got out safe.
Yeah, no shit.
That's good. Did you piss off anybody else? Was there other ones? I mean, the R. Kelly ones, everyone knows about that, but is there anybody else that you pissed off?
I mean, you know, I don't know. You know, I mean, you know, there have been some people not necessarily played out as dramatically as that. I mean, like, you know, let me take it inverse, right? Because part of the thing you have to do as well is understand how to pull the person in. What do they want to talk about? They will be more interesting if you are talking about what they want to talk about. And I was doing an hour with Courtney Love for Fuse.
Mm.
And I was a big Hole fan. I was a gigantic Nirvana fan. I was very, very excited. She sits down in the chair and she is not paying attention to me. She does not give a shit about me. Usually you can kind of get some chit chat and get some vibe going before you start rolling.
Yeah.
She is not fucking with me. She clearly has an attitude. She's not giving me any attention. She's not giving me any vibe. You know, she's kind of like, imagine like the Courtney you would expect, like sits down, slumps in her chair, like she couldn't smoke, but she, you know, sort of had the vibe of like, I'm smoking. I really don't give a shit about you. Leave me alone. And I'm like, we're about to like launch into like an hour interview. Like we should be like, and like, no, I'm getting nothing from her. And her assistant keeps running over and shoving her phone in her face. And at the time, I perceived it as kind of rude, like you're not helping me create this moment. But in actuality, the assistant, I found out later, she had like a overnight, all night fight with whoever was then her boyfriend.
Mm.
And she thought that they were going to break up and she was distraught about that.
Okay.
And the assistant is showing her like, look, he texted, said, it's going to be okay. We can talk later. Like, don't worry about it. Like, we'll figure it out. So she's trying to help, the assistant's trying to help me, like, chill her out. But she's coming in like just on 100 and just like rip roaring. And so she's not giving me any vibe. And the first 15 minutes or so, it's all like short answers. She's giving me nothing. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. And then she starts saying, you know, 5 more minutes. Go another 45 minutes. And she's like, 5 minutes. And I'm out of here. And I'm like, ugh. So what can I do to keep it going and to keep her going? Now, one thing I was like, you know, I am not sitting across from Courtney Love and not discussing Nirvana, one of the great bands of their time.
Mm-hmm.
So I like leaped. I was supposed to go to Nirvana like later, but I leapt into Nirvana like earlier. Like, so started asking about Nirvana. Really interesting stuff about Kurt and her. I remember talking about her like wrestling with Kurt, like when they were first dating, which was part of how she knew like he was the guy for her and this sort of thing. And we kind of transition out of Kurt, and I'm trying to figure out how to keep her engaged, because it's like that moment of like, am I keeping this person engaged, or are they gonna like flake out and be like, you know, I'm sick of talking to you, you know? Because if she could get up and walk out, like who's gonna do, like, you know, what's gonna stop her? And I figured that she probably would want to talk about sex. So I started to be like, so the question was, which of the, because she had a slew of like famous men who she was with after Kurt. And I was like, so which of the, I phrased it like, which of the famous boys is the best kisser? Which is like, she immediately, like, the whole body language changed. The whole mood and the vibe changed. And she was like, none of them. I educated them. I was better than them. You know, if you're not a pretty girl, she's saying, you have to bring the party. You have to be the one who like gets things sparked. So, you know, I was not the pretty girl, so I had to show them. I had to bring it to them. I had to put it on them. And she's not talking about kissing anymore. But, you know,
yeah.
So now, like, the whole mood and the vibe and the body language has changed. And then it's like, so wait a minute, when you're like rocking an audience, is that like you're like doing intercourse to them? Like, now she's fully invested. Now she's like, yes, it is like I am fucking the audience and I love it. And I'm riding on top of them and I'm giving it to them. And then it was like, you know, let's talk about your current band. And now she's like really into it. Like, I really want to talk about the band that I'm with right now. Like, this is post-Hole. And like, you know, and like singing the praises of the musicians who were like rocking with her and how much fun they were and how great they were. And I'm totally off page, right? Not doing the questions that I was supposed to be doing because I'm just trying to get her engaged and wanting to be in this conversation. And now that we've gone through talking about sex, talking about her, you know, her prowess, talking about, you know, relating to audiences, talking about her bandmate, now she's like fully invested and awake and there and like excited about the subjects. And it definitely turned around more sharply than I think any interview that I had ever done. Because it was just like plugging into like, what does she want to talk about? And I think anytime you get somebody talking about what they really want to talk about, what they love talking about, you're going to get the best out of that person.
Oh, wow. That's great advice. Very educational. Well, this has been amazing. I do like to end each episode with a charity. I don't know if your PR person told you. So is there a charity that you like to support or you want to give a quick shout out to?
There's not. I mean, you know, I try to take care of my kids. You know, my wife keeps bugging me, but there's not necessarily. No, I mean, like, you know, we've done. Maybe you can cut this out because I'm not up to speed on this. They didn't tell me that we were going to do this. I mean, like,
you can send it to me later. You can send it to me later. I always put it in the notes. So like, I'll put your website so people can go to your website, check out, you know, get the book and follow you and stuff. And then, you know, if they have money left over from buying your book, then, you know, throw a few bucks to whatever charity that you like.
There's a food bank type situation that my wife and by extension I have been a part of. Like, we go to this food bank in Brooklyn and there's these free fridges that sit around different spaces in the poorer areas of Brooklyn. And we fill up the fridge with, you know, like fruits and vegetables and bread and canned stuff and like, you know, just stuff people need, you
That's
know,
awesome.
and you know, and sometimes it might be cookie dough. It's not all just like healthy stuff, but like, you know, stuff people need and want, and they're free. So anybody can come and open the fridge and take what they want and what they need. And yeah, it's
and that's just a food
you know,
bank?
yeah. Well, there's a food bank that helps us source food for, because like we you know, like I've driven her over to the food bank. We get loaded up and put all the stuff in the free fridges. But I don't even know like what is the part of that folks could donate to. So I'd have to speak to her about like, you know, like how to do that.
Yeah, just send me the link later if you
But
can. Otherwise, I'll find something similar to that. Food Banks of America or one of those other. There's some Feed America, I think, is another. There's tons of charities that are similar. So that's a very good cause. I love it.
Thank you.
Very cool. Well, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally enjoyed it. Oh yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks. Okay, later.
Right.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Well, thank you for making it through that episode. If you got to this point, I know the audio wasn't great, but the content was. And I want to thank Touré for coming on the show. Make sure to check out the book, Nothing Compares to You, to hear more about Prince, and follow Touré on social media to keep up with him. And as always, I'm going to harass you a little bit to follow me on social media and like and share and comment on all my stuff. That helps me out immensely with the algorithm so that people can find my posts and the podcast can grow. Again, my main goal right now is to grow the YouTube channel. So if you can, subscribe to that and maybe convince a friend or two to subscribe as well. I will forever be grateful for that. And if you really want to show your appreciation, you can write me a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you do that and you send me a screenshot, I will give you a shout out on the show. That's a limited time offer only. So thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day and remember to shoot for the moon.